All right. And without further ado, I have the great pleasure of introducing our next guest, Ric Scalzo. Rick began studying herbal medicine and naturopathic medicine in 1980 and earned a master's degree in herbal medicine, later receiving an honorary doctorate of naturopathic medicine. He founded Gaia Herbs in 1987. I just want to say one of the best herb lines out there. I've been using for my patients for over 20 years. And he grew it into one of the most respected herbal companies in the country before selling it in 2019. Rick now leads Kokora and Costa Rican medicinal farms, integrating regenerative agriculture with herbal medicine. Rick, it is such a pleasure. Hello and
Oh,
welcome.
thank you. It's a pleasure. I'm so grateful.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And I do want to just say your product line, Gaia Herbs, it truly is. I'm not just saying that. It is always and still the number one company that I recommend people purchase because I know it's just such
Very kind.
incredible quality and it's just been a leader. It's been a leader for decades. So thank you for your incredible service.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I understand that you have slides today. I'm going to be sharing them for you. Let me just make sure we can get them up. How's that looking to you?
That's what I wanted to see. It's perfect.
Okay,
We can move through these, and when I pause, you can just forward to the next slide.
you got it. I'll be here. So over to you.
Okay, greetings, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, participating, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share something that I've been really passionate about for the last many years, regenerative agriculture. And more specifically, I really do think we need to put the word organic in there, regenerative organic agriculture, until the population really understands that regenerative is an advancement, a great advancement over organic. So the talk is really about how regenerative organic agriculture leads and builds a regenerative life. So we'll move on now and get right into it. So, in farming, I have had the good fortune of overseeing farm operations for Gaia and now for my new company, Kokora. And, I always felt it starts with the soil. And, on a broad scale throughout the world, we now have seen how conventional agriculture has damaged our soil. And I would go as far as to say has led us right up to, the reality of questioning, do we have dead soils that we're growing our foods in? And you can see in this image what dead soil looks like. It has no soil aggregation or even soil particulate. It doesn't look like it has any nutrients. It looks like it's primed for erosion. And I don't know how one could grow in this kind of soil. You look at the image on the right, and you'll see healthy root structure growing in much more rich soil with all of the components of what we would call regenerative type soil. Lots of organic matter, proper nutrient density, and overall, if we were to analyze it, and we do, you'll see the proper microbiome of the soil as well. So when we talk about regenerative organic agriculture, we have to pay attention to what we fondly call the soil food web. And the soil food web is essentially a community, just like we are a community of human spirits walking around. Many of us congregate into small groups of friends and family. Well, so do the organisms in the soil congregate. And, we have in our community many diverse organisms that make up the soil biome. These organisms include bacteria, fungi, nematodes, protozoa, earthworms. We see it all when we look at the soil from, looking at the soil under the scope of a microscope. And it's what is going on in the soil that drives our nutrient composition of the soil and our plant health. So if we go to the next slide, you can see that the soil food web is interactive. And it's interactive in such a way that it I like to use the word forms a quorum. And what I mean by that is all of these different species of organisms in the soil, um, uh, they will kind of group together in some ways, and where the beneficial organisms, when they're favored in the soil, the plants do really well. When the pathogenic organisms are favored in the soil, we have a problem with our plants. So when I use the word quorum, what I mean by that is the pathogenic organisms might favor, or the beneficial organisms might favor. If the beneficial ones favor, the population takes what I would call every day a vote. And, they decide what is the outcome for the plant by that vote. If the pathogens are predominating, we're going to have some problems with the plant more than likely. So this is an interactive species of organisms that form the soil food web and that are responsible for conducting, the essentially the elements that are in the atmosphere and the nutrients that are in the soil, the elements in the soil as well, into serving our food and our medicine. So you can see from this point of view how a soilless soil, if you will, on the left, how it really functions. When you don't have a carpet of green on your soil, you are allowing carbon to escape into the atmosphere. And when carbon escapes into the atmosphere, one of the most important building blocks of life, of creation, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen, is escaping. So you're breaking the necessary components for life. And if you look at the image on the right, you can see what happens if you keep a carpet of diversity on the soil. What happens is you grow healthy root structure, root tendrils, and larger biomass of your roots, and larger carbon of the above ground part of your plant. This is what we're shooting for, what we want. Now, when we start to rebuild the soil food web, one of the first things that we start to notice in the soil, and I'm going to share with you how to do this so you can all do it at home as well. But one of the first things we start to build is the populations of unique hyphae and mycelia in the soil. And those begin to express eventually, especially when we get our first flush of rains coming here in Costa Rica, they begin to express in a blooming or blossoming of these types of mushrooms. In fact, I can look in early April when the first rains come after a long dry season, I can look downstream along the beds and all I see is a carpet of white. And you would think it would have snowed last night. And what it is these mushrooms. And I love it when I see mushroom populations in our soils coming up, because it tells me that we have done our job to enrich the organisms in the soil. And, when we look under the microscope at these organisms, we will see, as you see here, the fungi, the beneficial fungi, the nematodes, the protozoa, each having their own responsibility, interacting with each other in the soil, and responsible for the outcome of what we are growing in our soil. So we do this biological assessment on our farm in Costa Rica. Where it all starts is growing healthy compost. This is a compost facility that we built on our medicinal farms. Each windrow is about 300 feet at any given time. We're growing, I think, 6 or maybe 8 windrows. And our windrow composition is, for nitrogen, we use chicken manure. For carbon, we use some of the organic species around the farm or in the forest around the farm. We mulch them and put them in there. We also use the waste product from the coffee production the coffee cascara, which is, considered a waste product in their production. We use other types of organic materials. And then when we turn the windrows, we inject water or spray water over the beds for the hydrogen. And when we turn it, we create an oxygenation of the bed to create the oxygen. So the four building blocks of life: carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen. That's what compost is made from, essentially. And the ingredients we select proportionately are proportioned correctly in order to produce a very bioactive, biocomplete compost. And here's another component of how you can enrich soil, and it's through it's called lumbricompost down here. It's growing specific varieties of earthworms and then using the earthworm manure, if you will, the poop, and creating vermicompost tea. So this is another thing that really takes the growing of plants and the regeneration of soil to the next level, is adding all of this, real interesting form of nitrogen to the soil. And on the next slide, you can see what we do to create compost tea. So we have this large tank. It's filled with water, and when we collect some of the vermicompost from these wire frames, we then put it into the tank and we ferment the process over a period of a couple of weeks. We have it circulating very nicely in the tank, and that is eventually taken and it's sprayed onto the crops and injected into the soils. It's a beautiful inoculant for the soils and a beautiful enrichment to the herbaceous part of the plant above ground. So this is a really good example of how it all starts. The picture on the left, you see little hyphae and mycelia, these white strands or little white dusting along in the soil, along the little branches in the soil or stems of grass. Let's keep it at there for a second. And if we back up, and then very, very interestingly, a very key component of regenerative farming is no-till, no plow. And what we use is this yeoman's plow. It's actually not a plow. You can see that it has these long shanks, 24-inch shanks that have this, I like to call it a spike at the bottom, and it goes down 24 inches into the soil, about 1 inch wide, and it actually opens up space, breaking up the bottom hard pan under the topsoil, breaking it up and allowing us to inject bioferments and other microbiome-rich solutions right into that open space. And that's how we're building the microbiome. That's one of the ways we're building the microbiome. I love this tool. It's amazing. Let's go to the next slide. And you can see when you start to kind of work your compost, work your soil with these bioferments, work and look at what happens. The soil becomes, the soil aggregates are all even. You see that in the slide? And you see all the beneficial mushrooms and fungi growing in the soil. And here we have, this is just a cover crop. This is Mucuna seed cover crop growing, and this will create a lot of biomass, a lot of organic matter. The vine will grow 20, 30 feet. And so all of that's going to die back and create more organic matter, more carbon, and really enrich the topsoil. So what we do on our farm, we don't turn the beds over, we build the beds up. And one of the ways to build up is to grow cover crop over. And when we harvest the crop, we actually, instead of turning the waste part of the crop into or cutting it and then disposing of it, we roller crimp it, let it die back naturally on the bed to add more carbon. And you can see the diversity, how beautiful these medicinal, how these fungi are looking in our field. Now, we go to the next slide, you'll see a lot of biodiversity. I'm sorry, I want to share this slide here before we look at the biodiversity. This is what happened 4 years ago when we purchased the farm. We looked at the earthworm population in our soils, and all we could find per square meter were 25 earthworms per square meter. 4 years later, after regeneratively cultivating our soils, the population has gone up to 400 earthworms. And I suspect it's even higher now because when I dig a shovel in to harvest a root of turmeric, I see earthworms galore. And it's really impressive to see how the soil is coming to life just by, tending to it regeneratively. Okay, so here we'll talk about the bioferments. And when I say bioferments, we're not buying them, we're making them. Very easy to make. And I'll give you a simple recipe you can make at home. You can see we're in here, he's just making it in this situation in a 55-gallon drum, but you can make smaller amounts. What we use is we go out to the forest, and our farm has forest around it. So we go out to the neighboring forest on our farm. We harvest a little bit of the forest floor, just a quarter inch, a half inch. We harvest forest debris from the trees and leaves that have fallen. We take it all back and we mulch it and then put it in a large pickup truck on the back. And then we start to add other ingredients to it. First ingredient we add is rice semolina, and this is a food. And the next ingredient we add is molasses, and this is the sugar to feed the ferments, to feed the yeast. The next ingredient we add is coffee hulls or coffee cascara, and then we add a little bit of cinnamon for resiliency for the plant. And we take this formula and we actually take it and mix it. It becomes a sticky paste. We put it in a 55-gallon sack, tie it on the top, and put that sack into a 200-gallon tank of water. And then we ferment it for 2 weeks. And what you see here is tanks of the bioferment that we have made on our own farm. We make our own fertilizers with our bioferment. We make our own pathogen controls like streptomyces and some of these biological pathogens. We make them right on our own farm. And I think there's another slide, the next slide. You can see what happens after we start to apply all this bioferment into the soil. You really build up the beds. You really give the plants an amazing force of energy and resiliency in which to grow. And, another thing here on the left, another thing is this biodiversity. So what you're looking at here is ginger, but ginger doesn't like to grow alone. It likes some company. So we grow it with crotalaria. That's what's in flower there. It's also commonly called sun hemp. It's a great companion for ginger. Look at how beautiful the ginger looks. This is at an early stage of growth. And, this is what we call regenerative farming. This is the beauty of growing, with, biodiversity intact and really respecting the populations of life in the soil. And I'm just going to pause and ask, do we answer questions now or wait till the end? Because I see some questions coming.
Yeah, we're going to pause for questions at the 45-minute mark, and
Okay.
I'll moderate all the questions. So you don't have to worry about the chat. We've got a whole team collecting all those questions.
All right. Perfect. Okay. So let's go on. And here you see a little further downstream what happens. This is maybe a month later. Notice the ginger has grown up. The crotalaria is still in bloom, probably now producing seed, which we collect ourselves for the next companion crop. But the mucuna is starting to vine out, spread all over, and create a 3-4 inch height carpet of biomass, which is all carbon when it comes to our regenerative soil, and all going to die back and get turned into the soil or just die back into the soil. So here's the practice. Here's how it's working. The yeoman plow, it's not turning it over and bringing bottom soil, hard pan up to the top and bringing the top soil down to the bottom. That's what plowing does. All this is doing is coming in and opening a 1-inch space. And that is essentially creating the space for which we will inject bioferment. And then you can see the compost application applier. It's putting the beautiful compost right on top of the bed. And that will eventually get mixed in with the soil when we start planting. So what are the benefits of regenerative farming like this? And, this isn't all we do, but I'll tell you more in just a bit. But one of the benefits is you grow more nutrient, more root density in your crops. And when you grow more root density, I'm going to have a slide that will show you, the roots have more touch points in the soil. And when they have more touch points, you have greater nutrient upcycling into the roots and into the plant. The other thing is you increase your water holding capacity. Water is our greatest resource when it comes to farming. And so much of the water that we have available to us is eroding off of our fields. And that's a problem when it comes to sustainable soils. We are improving soil structure. That means that the soil aggregates, the particle size, particulates of our soil are becoming real uniform so that we can get proper aeration, proper water holding, proper root growth, proper holding of carbon into the soil, proper prevention of erosion. These are just some of the benefits of regenerative agriculture. So let me just explain this mechanism. It's fascinating when you get to see it at work. You have a situation where if you have a carpet of green in your garden or on your farm like we do most of the year, that is going to begin to facilitate photosynthesis. And that really enables the plants to start growing. And when the plants start growing, we say that they have a greater capacity to sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And please keep in mind, when I talk about regenerative agriculture, regenerative life, this is one of the important aspects of regenerating life is carbon drawdown. And I would claim that if farmers grew regeneratively the way we are doing it, you will draw down more carbon than any other, mass program like switching cars to electric. You will draw down enough of carbon to do what we need to do to make this place a better place. I promise you that. This is how great the recycling promise is. But what's happening is we're drawing down carbon from the atmosphere. And carbon is feeding the beneficial fungi and bacteria in the soil. They're eating it all up at a faster and faster rate. And as they eat it all up, it really encourages more populations of bacteria and fungi. And then the protozoa go to work and they start to consume that bacteria and fungi as their food. And the protozoa a very interesting link in the, you might say, the cycle of carbon to nitrogen, because the waste product of these protozoa is ammonium. Ammonium is a very unique form of nitrogen, the form that plants can assimilate, and ironically enough, the form that grasses and weeds don't assimilate. Grasses and weeds are the first succession, and they prefer the more easily available nitrogen. But when you have, regenerative farming producing ammonium or ammonium nitrate in the soil, this is going to grow all these root tendrils that I'm talking about. And when it grows all these root tendrils, we have more capacity for touching the soil and taking up nutrients out of the soil. This is what we call nutrient cycling or nutrient upcycling. And that's how to produce good medicine, and that's how to produce healthy food. So here's another kind of benefit you can see here, healthy soil versus dirt. Notice the particle size in healthy soil is uniform, and with that, you have aeration and you have space for water to drain into the soil properly or to absorb into the soil property. With dirt, you don't. That water is just going to run off, erode, and prevent any dynamic interaction of the roots with the soil and with the nutrients. I would argue to say, this is good. I would argue to say that we have enough of nutrients in our soil to last 1,000 or 2,000 years. Somebody may challenge me on that. But without the proper microbiome of the soil, we don't have access to those nutrients. We need access. We need to work this whole relationship so that it's collaborative in nature. So look at in the jar. This is just an interesting example, really a test we do on the farm to look at our soil structure every year. And this kind of test, when the clump of soil is, absorbing water and not falling to the bottom as a big clump, then we know we have proper soil aggregation. This is another example. Here you're looking at an ashwagandha root of how these roots, and I will tell you, in 2021, when we first started growing ashwagandha on this farm, the ashwagandha roots were growing down 6 inches and then turning left or turning right. And why were they doing that? They were doing that because they were hitting a hard pan 6 inches down. They couldn't grow down further, and we couldn't access any more nutrition. Then we converted to regenerative organic the next year, and then we started to get these long, straight roots going down 2 to 3 feet. And I think on the next slide, we have a picture of that. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? This is what happened in the transition from one year to another. These are ashwagandha roots. Yeah, it is a big wow. And I think, it's all gratitude to nature, just working collaboratively in harmony with nature. Now, it's not only this being the story about how we're changing the relationship of how our plants perform in the soil in terms of root growth, or when we look at biomass and nutrient density. This is a true story. We have the testing instruments so we can do all this test. By the way, look at how dark and rich that soil is. 1 year transforming a sugarcane farm into a regenerative organic farm. 1 year. However, we did a study on the turmeric growing the first year organically. Our yields on the turmeric roots were 15,000 kilograms per hectare. We took that same field, which we don't normally grow the same crop in the same field, but in this case, we took the same field the following year and grew turmeric in that field. You know what our yield was? It wasn't 15, and this is through regenerative practice. It wasn't 15,000 kgs. It was 80,000 kgs. So please don't tell me that you can't do this profitably or economically. Your yield increase is really telling the story. However, because I make medicine out of, for Kokora, out of these turmeric roots, I'm interested in the curcuminoid and turmerone concentration. Our curcuminoid concentration went from 2.5% to 8.5%, almost a fourfold increase in the active principles of curcuminoids, and the turmerones, the test results were off the charts. How much turmerones were concentrating in these roots. So, and as the slide shows, the resiliency we're building to pathogens in the soil. Look at that. That is a real picture with real turmeric growing, and it's not even reached its full maturity at that point. Look at how untainted, undiseased turmeric, and I'm really proud of how this whole, I would call it an experiment, how it has really yielded so beautifully on our farm. Look at this. This is ashwagandha. Ashwagandha, look at how beautiful the crop looks, how dense it looks. And it hasn't even gone to flower or seed. Yeah, it's really amazing. Next. And this is Tulsi, holy basil. Look at how beautiful these plants look. And by the way, we're growing Oxymum taniflorum, which is probably, from my perspective, having done biochemical analysis, probably the most active variety of Tulsi for making good medicine. So here you see in this slide just what I'm talking about. When you properly colonize your soil with beneficial organisms, look at it on the right side of the dark line, how much more root tendrils, root structure your plants are producing. That's what's causing all this increase in biomass and increase in productivity with your bioactive chemicals in our herbs. This is nutrient upcycling, nutrient density, and this is, just what we want to see. And it's all working together: carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen. And this is interesting. I won't go through it, but this chart actually shows the findings from Rodale Institute, which is doing a lot of great science work on regenerative farms, showing how much more nutrient density are in the food crops that they are testing. And, it's 15 to 35% just in what they're looking at here. And it's pretty amazing how this nutrient density conversation starts to come alive with regenerative organic farming. Same is true here. Looking at the withanolide concentration of ashwagandha, how much more withanolides are produced through regenerative farming. So again, I don't want to repeat myself, but this just shows another image of carbon drawdown, putting the carbon in the soil, allowing the protozoa to excrete ammonium into the soil. The ammonium feeds the root structure, opens up, more space, creates more aggregate from, it helps to produce more earthworms, which creates more aeration, more portals for water to feed the roots. And, this whole cycle is now coming alive. Mm-hmm. And, this idea of carbon sequestration it's a measurable event. You can measure on your farms or, like our farms, you can measure how much carbon sequestering is going on. It's all about keeping a carpet of green on your soil. And here you get, this has not been proven. It's only shown somewhat in the literature, but it raises the question of whether or not regenerative agriculture, regenerative organic agriculture can actually clean up our soils. From pesticides, heavy metals to hydrocarbons, microplastics, can it clean up our soils? And I'm very encouraged with the possibility that in time, with more testing, we're going to see this biological transformation of our soils to a much cleaner world if we all collaborate together. Now, we've been talking about the microbiome of the soil, but I would like to share with you some very, very interesting findings because we don't live in isolation to the soil. We live in collaboration with it. Everything that sustains us really comes from the soil when you think about it. And so when we say soil biome to gut biome, this is really a truthful statement. What I have noticed, and you know, I had to we did, I think, 5 studies now on crops, roots, leaf that are sprayed with bioferments. And we use a lot of the bioferments because we make it ourselves. We have a whole facility stored with bioferments. So every day bioferments are going on our crops. So when we do the microbiological testing on our crops, you would expect that you're going to see high microbial activity. And what is interesting, we have seen higher microbial activity. However, please pay attention to this one. The microbiological activity, when you do your total aerobic plate count study on your crops before they go to market, when you look at them and speciate those microbes, something nobody really is doing. We just thought of it recently. Look at these species. You know what the species are? 100% have been transformed through the bioferment to healthy Bacillus subtilis organisms with the right variety that feeds your gut. So I can tell you, and this isn't an advertisement for Kokora products, but I can tell you with these herbs from Kokora that we're growing regeneratively on our farm, we're not only getting the benefit of higher nutrient density, but we're getting the benefit of taking a naturally living probiotic that's necessary for gut health with the herb, naturally occurring on and with the herb. Something we haven't thought about measuring before. But it's fascinating how when you talk about soil biome to gut biome, how with regenerative farming, we can start to repopulate our gut and create more gut diversity. Bacillus subtilis and Bacillus primilis are 2 essential spore-forming bacteria, so they can survive the extraction process, the processing into a product. They can survive that, and when we consume these types of herbs, they are being consumed with the herb. So look at all these connections, immune system health, because our immune system is born in our gut. The more diversity and stronger the biome of the gut is, the healthier our immune system is. And this comes from soil microbiome, from more nutrient density, increased gut microbiome, and improved digestion, improved immunity. It's just a relationship that we're building. And this kind of show, even with animal products, even though we don't have true animal products on our farm, we do have worms, lots of them that we grow in our vermicompost operation. But it's quite interesting how all these come together. There's one more thing on the next slide I want to point out before I close, and that is how regenerative farming through the building of the biome of the soil, how it enables a necessary amino acid called ergothioneine Some of you have heard of that, how it tends to increase the availability of ergothioneine to certain crops, particularly legume crops. Ergothioneine is an amino acid which is essential for our longevity and our health span, and we generally don't consume it because it's not being produced in dead soil. It's only produced in living soil. And yet it plays a very essential role in health span and lifespan. So this is something that when you talk to the mushroom people, and I'll call out the folks over at Namex right now who've done a lot of work on ergothioneine and mushrooms, how important this is for human health. And here I'm finding now that it's actually a mechanism of increased ergothioneine with regenerative organic agriculture. So on the next slide, I'll close by just saying that, if you can go to the next slide, that we can't discriminate between the health of the soil, plant, animals, and human life. It's all interactive. It's all collaborative. We share this this relationship, and it's really about building a consciousness of awareness of what potentiality lies for the human body, for our health span, for our lifespan, for the soil, for our overall sustainability in our environment with all the carbon drawdown. It's quite impressive what we can do. And I encourage you all to start in small ways and grow it to something really beautiful. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Rick. What an incredible presentation. I was glued to your every word, and my hope, my wish is that this presentation could be broadcast everywhere. I think everyone needs to hear it. My first question for you, we're going to come to the questions in the audience in just a moment, but what's your knowledge on this quality of information being passed on to big agro? Is there any reception at
Yeah,
all?
I actually gave this presentation to the Global Sustainable Agricultural Network in Indonesia, and they influence sustainable growers all over the world. On the previous speaker talking about indigenous peoples, that's who they work. And so they're populating the story now as we speak, literally, about incorporating regenerative agriculture. And a lot of these indigenous and um, other types of growers in developing lands. They are also using biochar and bamboo vinegar to as part of the regenerative practice as well, which is what we do. Now, I have been invited by the government of El Salvador twice. I have given presentations thanks to President Bukele and his whole ministers were in. The vice president of El Salvador was present because they want to convert agriculture in El Salvador to regenerative organic. So
Wow.
they've called upon me to guide them in this process. I'm heading there at the end of this month to make yet a third presentation. So we're starting to do the work that can influence, movers and shakers.
Oh, that just is so powerful and so incredibly moving. Wow. So there's a number of questions here. Someone says, how does building up the beds work with perennials? Do they get buried?
No, not at all, because with perennials, you just keep adding more compost. And
Mhm.
another thing we do, we bought a very, very large mulcher, commercial mulcher, and we have the capacity to mulch paro trees, which are very high in nitrogen, that the neighboring farms don't want on their farms. So we go over, we harvest their paro branches, we mulch them, and we build up mulch, literally 4, 5, 6 inches of mulch on perennials. And so every year we get another layer and layer.
Yeah, that's what I do here. I have a small acreage where I grow my own personal medicinal garden for my practice all here. And that's what I do too, is mulch those perennials heavily. Someone
Yeah.
says if you needed to regenerate really dry, hydrophobic desert soil, what would your first step be?
Well, I think the first step is to, it's hard to say. I would assume that soil is pretty sandy. I don't know if I'm correct, but I'm just going to assume that. I think you need to change the complexion of the soil. So I would just begin composting and start building, at the first thing, building up a compost addition to the soil, and then just start the process when you have more organic matter in the soil, start the process of regeneratively building it up. But
Yeah.
you've got to start with organic matter.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. We have another question here. Do you use inoculants of mushrooms in your compost to get foot fungal hyphae, or do you source input materials that have high fungal mass?
No, we don't source anything. We're using resources from our farm and in the forest around our farm to create the bioferments, to regenerate the fungal growth that you're seeing. All the mycelia, all the hyphae, all the mushrooms you see are just, you know, are just repopulating, if you will, naturally. And it's only because of the addition of the bioferments we're using.
Yeah, I think something I was really moved by in your presentation is how it's kind of a closed system. There's not a lot of inputs that you're bringing in from outside, it looks like.
No, there's only one or two amendments we use, which are allowed in organic farming, to eradicate these little tiny black beetles and orange beetles on passion flower and
Hmm.
ashwagandha at a certain stage of growth. But that's all we use, and it's only for a certain stage of growth.
Yeah, so inspiring. Someone asks, what species of worms do you recommend for vermiculture?
Uh, in here, I don't know, the whole varietal, but in Costa Rica, it's called the lumbri worm, lumbri, and that's used for a specific reason, which I really can't explain properly. But that's what we use. It's not the big earthworms; it's the smaller worms, and apparently, it's what everyone uses here in Costa Rica.
Very neat. And another question, what happens when your soil gets so good at water retention that it's too wet for plants? Does that ever happen?
No, I mean, I haven't noticed it because here we get 150 inches a year of rain. That's pretty amazing how much rain you get. And you do not get water saturated soils. You do not get erosion. And we've created drain ditches. When we first moved here, we had to, really move the water off the farm. Now we don't.
Mm, hmm.
We're
Incredible.
getting we're
That's,
getting a lot of rain.
yeah,
And
that's,
it comes in 5 months out of the year.
and someone remarks, there appears to be many rows of the same species of plants in your photos. How many single species get concentrated in a certain field, and do you rotate species or intermix them?
I guess the yes, we rotate all the time, and you know, a really high mark you get in regenerative farming when the inspectors come is the diversity in your field.
Mhm.
There's one field, I'll just say one because this one stands out. We have many fields where we have diversity, but in one field we have the understory is turmeric, passion flower, and andrographis. So three understory crops. Then we have Perot trees growing. Then we have Mucuna vines growing up the Perot trees. And then we have Cannavalier in every third row. So we have six crops growing in one field.
Wow.
That's just an example of the kind of diversity we're creating on our farm.
Incredible. And how long have you been living in Costa Rica?
6 years now.
And what's it like for you? I live in Western Canada, and which is such a different ecosystem than Costa Rica. What's it like for you adapting to that ecosystem from where you were before?
The only challenge for me is when the rains are in October, November, when the rains are really hard. I like to travel during that time
Hmm.
because it's a lot of rain. It can rain 6 inches in a day.
And getting to know the plants, like that's the thing that so intrigues me is you're living amongst, I don't, where did you live before Costa Rica?
On the Gaia farm.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, of course he did. So, I mean, it's such a different ecosystem, isn't it?
Oh my
Now?
God, it's tropical. I mean,
Yeah.
we only grow 12 crops on our farm.
Uh-huh. Okay.
We
Yeah.
don't grow. Gaia grew, at the time when I left, maybe 20, 25 crops. We're growing 12 crops. Our materia medica is much smaller with Kokora intentionally. And but the crops we're growing do very well. Very, very well. And most of them are tropical acclimated or come from
Amazing.
the tropics.
And someone would like to know what is your estimated cost of the decompaction process? How much was the machine that drills the hole? That's a funny question.
No
So,
man's foul. I don't know if I'm going to give you the right answer.
yeah.
I'm going to say 20 to $30,000.
Yeah.
It's a very, very uniquely custom built piece of equipment, but the best investment I ever made for this farm.
Yeah, I got that. I saw your excitement when you were talking about it.
Oh, it's so true.
And how do you measure sequestration at your farm? How do you actually measure that carbon sequestration?
I'd have to, we have an agronomist with all these measuring tools and instruments. And he's out there all the time collecting samples of soil carbon, and he does it through soil collections. And I know he's using his microscope to measure, and he's using outside labs to measure, but the actual test, I don't know. I rely on his expertise in that field. Um,
Mm,
but can I say one thing about this carbon? Um, you know, a lot of the lands here in Central America have been affected by volcanic eruptions, and so is ours. We have a huge volcano that was active long, long ago, which has deposited a lot of volcanic rich soil. And when I mentioned, I saw somebody who says, I love biochar. When I mentioned activated biochar, and it's like having all that volcano-rich deposits coming onto your field, which is like new life, adding new life to the soil. But the important point I want to make is when you sequester carbon from the atmosphere through the green carpet process, that carbon is not stable carbon. The plants have to consume it and use it and recycle so forth every day. When you put biochar, activated biochar into your soils, that's very stable carbon. That carbon can last thousands of years in your soil. So that's kind of like a very another exciting thing about how you can make your soils volcanic rich like soils.
yeah, it's so cool. I live in a small farming community, and yeah, the people who are into biochar, they get really excited, and it is a phenomenal ancient technology, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
just a couple more questions for you. First, of course, everyone is so excited about your products and what you're doing with herbs. So where can people purchase Kokari products?
Yeah, cocoralife.com, www.cocoralife.com. All of our products are sold also on Amazon and under Kokora Regenerative Products. And I hope people will use them because using regenerative organic products the way we're growing these herbs, it, aside from taking the product, you're taking a very dynamic part of the soil microbiome with the herb into your gut and regenerating your gut at the same time. So while you're doing something amazing for the environment by consuming regeneratively grown crops.
Yeah, so powerful.
Let me spell
Eh,
Kokora. It's Kokora.
Yeah, and we've got it also. Everyone who is here at this summit, you're going to get emails with all of this information as well. So there'll be lots of follow-up materials. And I also understand that those of you who are VIPs of our summit, you have a bonus of $15 off of all orders of Kokora products of $100 or more. And once again, you will be getting all of that in your emails.
Yes.
Now, Rick, I'm curious, the last question I have for you, as you may know that this summit is in support of our permaculture program here. And what would you say to somebody who's just beginning? They've just learned about regenerative farming, this new concept right here in your presentation. What would you say to somebody who wants to get involved with permaculture? They want to begin their journey of regenerative life, really. What would you say to them? And perhaps the question is, what was your aha moment?
You know, first of all, I would say there are many, many moments of awe growing regeneratively. You see things that you've never seen before because life is happening, it's becoming alive right in front of you. And I think the first advice I would say, first comment I would make is recognize that you can do this. It's not a problem that you're solving that's bigger than you. It's a collaboration. It's like building any relationship that you've ever built in your life. It just requires a little time and energy, love and giving. And all the things that I've talked about today, you can hopefully re-listen to this through Ecoversity's programs. But all these things you can start to do them on a small scale and then gradually do it. But everyone doing it makes the difference.
Yeah.
And by consuming regeneratively grown herbs and foods, the way we've talked about, you are contributing to the solution in the environment.
Absolutely. I think that's what I love so much about the permaculture principles, which are based in everything you've presented today, that regenerative way of living. And it's, as I was listening to you, I'm not a farmer myself, although I am a grower, but um, it's intuitive. It makes sense. Like every single thing that you said makes sense. And this is what I love about these principles and these practices. They're awe-inspiring and very moving, and yet very intuitive when you think about it. And as you're breaking it all down, that when we're in harmony and we're supporting biodiversity, of course it's good for our bodies and good for the earth. So it's
Yes,
just so
exactly.
brilliant.
Thanks for acknowledging that. It's so true. And I speak that from the level of experience rather than just from the level of book knowledge. I speak it from my heart as a living experience I have had.
Yeah, well, that comes through your teaching, and that's why I think you're getting so much praise all over the place here. So, thank you so much for your time, Rick. It's been such a delight. And for all the VIP members of this summit, you do get this recording forever, so you can rewatch it. I know I will be. And we're so excited to support this, all of your endeavors. This is so exciting. And right after this day, I'm going to go buy myself some of your products. I'm really excited about what you're doing.
Well, thank you all very much. And to all the listeners, thank you. And I just encourage you to the nth degree. Get started is well begun.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. Have a
All
beautiful
right.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you.